Hey gang, before we get into the show, I wanted to share this really cool Kickstarter with you. It's from the company Flight of Harmony. They have this module they're making called the Face Hugger, which is an 8-stage, all-analog, chainable, addressable, non-linear function generator. The Face Hugger can be an arpeggiator, CV sequencer, burst generator, envelope generator, LFO, and much more. They can also be connected in series for longer sequences and in parallel for making chords. Multiple expansion panels are also in development for even wider functionality. Here's the rub. The Kickstarter runs until April 22nd, and it is at 53% as of April 3rd. So, I got the link in the show description. Please head to the Kickstarter page and help this amazing looking module become a reality. Once again, that is the Face Hugger by Flight of Harmony. Link in the show description. Let's get into the show.
This week's episode of Podular Modcast is brought to you by The Summit, Novation's flagship 2-part 16-voice polyphonic synthesizer. Summit's digital new Oxford oscillators offer subtractive, FM, and wavetable synthesis, and feed into genuine analog dual filters, distortion, and VCAs. The multi-timbral engine enables merging and combining of 2 complete and independent patches, while up to 16 simultaneous voices deliver enough harmonic depth for even the richest pads. And you guessed it, this patch playing below my voice right now was made on my Novation Summit. If you want to learn more, click the link in the show description.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held, and this week we have Geddes Gengras on the show, and I'm so excited. Maybe one of the most requested guests on the Discord. We have a great chat. We do talk a little bit about nu metal, maybe a bit about nu metal. So right after I'm done recording this, I'm heading to the post office and I am going to be shipping out 6 different packages that I am passing on to Patreon subscribers. 4 of those have modules in them. They all have patch cables, cassettes, stickers, blank panels, and I want to try to do these giveaways as often as possible. So if you want to be privy as to when those are going to happen and what I'm going to be passing on, then head over to patreon.com/PodularModcast. I really appreciate everybody who has supported me throughout the years. I would also like to say thank you to Afterlater Audio for their continued support of Podular Modcast. For more information about their modules, head over to afterlateraudio.com, link in the show description. And though I did mention it at the top of the show, I just want to do a quick reminder that the Flight of Harmony Kickstarter is still going on, but it's getting very close to ending. So if you want to help make the Face Hugger become a reality, then once again, head to that show description, click the link, and support a cool company. So as you can see, I'm recording outside. I got bored. I wanted to shake things up, and also wanted to show off my new triangle that my dad gave Hannah and I. It doesn't sound very good, but it looks cool. I really like it. I'm also very excited because I'm headed to Palm Springs in a couple days with my best friend, his wife, and my wife's best friend. And I'm gonna go to Joshua Tree. I'm bringing the camera, bringing a little synth, and I'm hoping I'll have a really cool remote performance to share with you soon. Speaking of sharing, I've been getting a lot of people sharing their music with me and the rest of the community on the PodMod Discord, and I haven't been great about reminding people that that exists. So if you want to come join the community and talk about all things modular and then a bunch of other really cool topics, the invite link is in my Instagram bio, and if you can't find it, you can shoot me an email or a DM or something. I think that's about all the business I have for you. Let's get into this episode. All right, so where to start? Because, you know, I talk to a lot of people and I find most of my guests, you know, via Instagram, you know, just something pops up and I check some stuff out and that sounds cool.
Sure.
And I've seen your name on Instagram. I think we follow each other. You know, it's nice to finally put a face to a name that pops up all the time, you know, in my feed.
Mm-hmm.
um, I reached out because well, one, I checked out your stuff and really liked it. And then I also asked my Discord, like, hey, who do we want to see on the show? And there were a number of people who threw your hat in the ring. So I was like, well,
That's very
I
cool.
need to do that. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I didn't realize. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize that, that you had done some work with Greg Fox. He's been on the show before.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've known Greg. I've known Greg a very long time. We actually went to college together. Or I mean, I guess I had already dropped out at that point, but I was living in and around the Bard College area when he showed up as a freshman, and he played drums in a band with a friend of mine, and I'd see him around, and then as things are, I left in 2005. I moved to LA and was. Friend of mine, Britt Brown, who runs the Not Enough Fun label, had just linked up with this group from Baltimore, Teeth Mountain, and they were touring with Dan Deacon. And he was like, hey, do you want to go to this show at the Troubadour? It's going to be weird, but Teeth Mountain are playing and they're cool. And and this guy was standing outside the venue. He was like, I think I know you from Bard. Did you used to deliver pizza? That's not actually what he asked. He asked me something more illicit than that, but I did deliver pizza. And certainly to him. And then that was kind of it. And then we played together for the first time. Show that Britton Powell put together in New York, and it was super fun. And we're like, hey, why haven't we done this before? We've known each other for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And so, we've been playing together. It started as a duo, and now we're doing it as a trio with this amazing guitar player and singer, Gray McMurray. And it's just, I mean, I won't speak for Greg, but I've heard him say it's one of the most fun projects he's involved with. I certainly feel the same way. Like playing with those guys is an absolute blast. We've never rehearsed, and we've never played not at a show. So that's kind of like the unofficial rule for the band. Although we want to make a record, so we're gonna have to
record a show.
Do that. We don't really, I mean, we'll sometimes talk before the show, but then we don't do any of the stuff we talked about.
Right,
so.
Of course, yeah.
But they're both such natural improvisers. So it's like I feel like whatever happens can just happen. And I don't worry about, is it going to be good?
Yeah, that video I saw on YouTube was pretty awesome. You had a nice,
cool.
nice grooves going. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, and then Hausu Mountain. Been a fan of that label for a while, so yeah. I actually need to get them. I think I need to get those guys on here. Max and Doug, right? Run it.
Yeah. I mean, they're the best. I love working with them. Like, I mean, really, one of the best. I mean, the best label experience of my life, just because they're so enthusiastic. They do everything themselves, from the artwork to the promotion, and it all works. They have a great audience. They're so sweet and just like down for whatever I want to do. I mean, I've made 3, records for them, and I don't think they could be 3 more different records, like both in, sort of techniques used and the sounds and everything. And it's just always like, hell yeah, this is cool. We love it,
Yeah. They're Chicago, right?
Yeah. And it's funny. I've never actually met Doug in person. We were both at the Grateful Dead 50th anniversary shows in Chicago, like texting each other, trying to find each other in the parking lot. But it's basically impossible to do, and we were both tripping. So that was not working out so well. But I met Max at Trip Metal Fest / Movement in Detroit in like 2017, I want to say, and and we just hit it off right away, and they're great. And Max is a dude that I text more days than I don't text, and usually we're talking about video games, not music, but we've definitely become pretty close. Right
on. Well, speaking of, you said that they couldn't be, the albums on that label couldn't have been more different or made in different techniques and gear. That is something that I've noticed with just perusing your catalog, and you have through your liner notes on your releases. It seems like you kind of get a set like kind of like a little setup or instrument that you build for a particular project or something, and that seems pretty cool. And I want to dive more into that aspect, but I'd like to just go back and get to know you. So where are you from? And yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, I grew up in the like central Connecticut.
Okay.
I'm 40. I'm 40. Yeah, I'm 40. So, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and in high school, I wasn't really very into music as a kid. I liked comic books and I liked, comedy. I liked cartoons and Star Wars and, stuff like that. But music, I would listen to music with my dad who loved music, but it wasn't like it wasn't like my own interest really until, high school probably, and getting into sort of like reintroducing myself to classic rock and like figuring out like, oh, this is Black Sabbath and this is Led Zeppelin. But then also, punk and hardcore were huge things for me. And then kind of the 90s, 80s and 90s, independent rock and just independent music in general were really where I started to like tune in and get obsessed,
Right.
And that was when music started to really feel like an identity,
Okay. Yeah, you kind of this is awesome. You kind of started to answer my usual question as far as music goes.
I've listened before.
So like what is the song, band, or like live show or whatever that switched you from listener to wanting to be a participant?
Well, there was a couple things I think, and that's a good question. I like that. Definitely, like my first DIY shows were I went to this like little tiny high school in Connecticut that was run by Quakers.
Oh wow!
And it was next door to the University of Hartford. And
Okay.
in the University of Hartford, there was a little student center, coincidentally named the Gengras Student Center because my grandmother had gone there, and my grandfather gave some money to the school. And
Oh
so they
wow!
called it the Gengras Student Center.
That's cool.
I didn't know it existed.
Wait, so you show up and you just see your last name on this building?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was, it's like it's not like it was like a big sign. It's like you go and it's like written on like on like like the sticker letters,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
It's a pretty like I've never heard that last name, so like you must have been like, well, and the fact that you had grandparents in the area, did you automatically know?
And my father had gone there as well, actually. Like my dad didn't go to college until after I was born, and that was when he decided he wanted to be a teacher, and he went to the University of Hartford.
Okay.
So it was, it was like it had always been a place that was there, but I didn't, think that there would be punk shows there, but there were.
Right.
And I had a friend in my high school who I'm still close with, my friend Matt, who was sort of already, as like a freshman, sophomore, like tapped into the local hardcore scene. He was going to a lot of shows, and he'd put out like a comp tape, which I thought was so cool. It was like raising money for breast cancer research. And I was
cool.
like, how we're children. Like, how are you like getting in touch with bands? And this is when I kind of learned about like DIY. And
did he say
so going
just
to
ask?
shows at that place? I mean, it was sort of just like, he was like, yeah, I went to shows, and then I got their mailing addresses, and you write them a letter,
Yeah.
So that was definitely like going to shows there. There was a stage, but it was about, at 8 inches off the ground maybe. And then, they're like frying mozzarella sticks like 3 feet away. And it just, I had been to a couple bigger shows before, but seeing a band in that kind of environment was definitely the first time I had the thought like, oh, this is something that like normal people can do. Like, you don't have to be the guy in Korn, which is like, I mean, like that's my previous concert experiences where, I went to
I love that.
And that's like so far away.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Well, when you mentioned you're 40, I'm going to be 39 day after tomorrow. So I imagine we have a lot of overlap and thank you. And metal, and unfortunately new metal and metal. That was my shit in elementary school and high school. And then luckily I discovered punk rock to pull me away from that. But who were some of your like metal bands before this experience. This is such a pointless segue, but I just have to ask.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's like definitely not the first time I've talked about this, which I love because I feel like a lot of people are like embarrassed to talk about lame things that they were.
Yeah,
into.
I was until just like recently. I'm like, at a certain point, you're just like, well, I was a kid. Are you gonna like make fun of me for what I liked when I was 12?
Yeah,
like,
and I mean, I think people today don't appreciate how difficult it was to find out about things in a pre-internet era.
Totally,
like,
yeah.
Especially
100%.
if you grew up in the suburbs and it was just sort of like not around.
My graduating class was 84. I was a small town, I had nothing, dude. Like
mine was 28. So,
oh wow, okay. So, holy shit.
But I had two friends, one that I went to high school with and then one that I had gone to elementary school with who went to a different high school. And, they would make me tapes. And this is like how I learned about everything from like Black Flag to like the Velvet Underground to Suicide to, Pavement. And it was all kind of just like being put on me at the same time. But yeah, before that, I mean, I had a brief dalliance with the nu metal thing. I was like I wouldn't say I was a skateboarder because I didn't ride it that much, but I carried around a skateboard for a few years.
Oh yeah, Skater was like a group. Even if you didn't skate,
yeah.
like we all wore independent sweatshirts and DC shoes and shit like that. Yeah.
So, it was a lot of like listening to the modern rock radio station. So it was things like, Korn and Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine, 9 Inch Nails. I liked but like, Sublime, and it was, it's just like, it was the only music that you heard that was oriented towards you as a young person.
Right. Absolutely.
And then there was that moment where like I heard like Black Flag for the first time. And it was because, like my friend and I thought the Rollins band was really funny when we saw them on Beavis and Butthead. And then my friend was like, oh wait, but he was in this other band. And so, I got In My Head was the first Black Flag album I got. And it blew my mind. I mean, it's just because it was so weird and gnarly and ugly. And
Milo Goes to College.
Rocketed me out.
Yeah. Descendants, sure. Milo Goes to College, and Misfits Collection 1 were the two that was like the seeds being planted to kind of start pulling me away from like the radio rock. But I'm also curious, like, is there anything from that era? I mean, of course, I still like a lot of like the punk stuff that I got into that's like timeless. Like, I mean, I've got the fucking Milo tattoo. I mean, it's not like I listen to it all the time, but I still really like it.
It formed you,
Totally, absolutely. And when I hear that album, it's just like it just automatically like I want to go skateboarding or I want to do something physical. So I should probably listen to that album more often because I'm feeling it,
It's true. Like, I love that stuff. Like for a workout, it's a great vibe.
We can leave this subject in a moment, but I'm always so I get excited to talk to like-minded people, like we're both in this kind of same scene, but who are into the kind of this music. Like, do you think any of that, like, does any of that like nu metal or late 90s, early 2000s, does any of that hold up in your opinion? Is there any of that you still like could listen to non-nostalgically?
I mean, non-nostalgically
it's kind of hard to even
answer.
Right, yeah, right.
But no, look, I would say like, could I sit down and even like just listen to a Korn album? No, I don't think I could. I could listen to Deftones. I ride hard for Deftones. But
I was so fucking fishing for that
band,
I was so fishing for that because I think it's unfortunate timing for the Deftones because I think that band's awesome. Like, sure. I genuinely think they're a great band. And I actually listened to System of a Down's first album the other day because I heard an interview with Serge on it. And that album like has some fucking bangers on it too. And I'm like, oh shit, if they would have stopped here at this album, like
sure.
that would have probably, I think they would have aged as like a cooler band, but then they started making, they're like kind of more, not as heavy stuff, but
they were like, I feel like they're the band that like, that was like the moment right when I got off, like they were the next thing that happened where I was like, oh, that's cool. But like, I'm also like, maybe not here anymore.
Man, I remember the moment, like I started, like there is an actual moment that I started feeling like I was drifting out. So I was at the Tacoma Dome, which is just now right down the road from where I live, and it was the Pledge of Allegiance tour, which had a way different meaning, I think, pre 9/11 and George W. and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was Mudvayne, System, and Slipknot, and I was in the pit, which I usually didn't do. I usually like to watch the shows because I always wanted to see what they were playing and what kind of gear they were using. Like I was into it then, but I was in the pit going across. I had the momentum of the crowd pushing me, and this girl, is coming from the opposite way, the same momentum, and we just clocked heads. And all I remember seeing as I like did a 180 and disappeared into the crowd and fell was her doing the same thing. And then it like I tried to like look and see, I couldn't find her, so I went and sat down. And I'm sitting there, like at the back in the like this bleacher section, and Slipknot starts, and they had these on each side of the screen or each side of the stage, these giant sixes, 3 of them, 666, like light up signs that were like as tall as people. And the chorus of their song was, "If you're 555, then I'm 666." And I was like, this is so fucking stupid. And yeah, I feel like that was the moment I started. Sorry, that was such. I'm like, I invited you here to learn about you, and I'm talking about like fucking Slipknot. I did not expect that.
I mean, I think we all have those moments. We have those moments. Like, I mean, I have a very similar moment like when I stopped going to hardcore shows, because it was just like I remember going to see Converge in Connecticut, and I got punched in the back of the head twice, and a chunk of hair ripped out of my head. They had to stop the show like 5 times because people were fighting, and I was just like, this isn't fun. I'm too old for this. Like, I just don't, and not that you're ever too old to be a punk, but like I was just like, this particular environment is not where I want to be anymore. I just really would like to watch this band from like a balcony somewhere. Right. But there isn't one, so I'm gonna leave.
I feel like hardcore, or a certain vein of hardcore, started kind of trending in like a almost like Joe Rogan-y kind of like direction.
Well, I mean, that was definitely like always there. Like there was always like that sort of jockey element, and especially like in the Northeast. I mean, I think it's very different on the West Coast.
Yeah,
like the Northeast. I was close to Albany. I was close to Boston. These are like New York City, which are like the capitals of like tough guy hardcore.
Yeah, is that like Hatebreed from around there? Or?
Yeah, Hatebreed, stuff like that. And I loved. It's funny. I was terrified of that stuff back then. I would only go see like the bands with like weird haircuts and like skinny jeans. And, like it was like I mean, we called it emo and screamo, but that means a very different thing 20 something years later. But like I was terrified of those bands, and now I love those bands. And there's something so fascinating about them to me. And I do like a little Instagram where I just like post like videos from like hardcore shows just for fun. And I do so much of that like tough guy jock stuff, and I feel like it's because now I'm safely removed. Like I'm not looking to see if somebody's going to come punch me.
Right. Yeah.
There's the element of safety, and I can kind of just enjoy it for like the theatricality, and also like you watch it now and you're like, oh my god, they're babies. Look at all those babies. They're all children,
yeah.
Like the big white T-shirts, like
totally, yeah. Well, I swear we're going to move on, dear listener, but I'm having too much fun with this. Well, so, on being on the West Coast, like the Epitaph and the Fat Records thing was like super huge for me and my crew of friends. And it's really funny.
Well, I mean, me too. Like,
yeah. So like this is a little sidebar. It's funny. Like my wife, she grew up in a town pretty close to me and has friends from high school who are all awesome. And I've become good friends with them. But they still they go to like the punk rock bowling. They like travel to like Nevada. And it's just they've been listening to like Strung Out and NoFX and Bad Religion like since then, and just never if it's on, or sometimes I'll get a weird hair, but it weirds me out not weirds me out. It's just I find it strange that somebody can still listen to like just the exact same shit for so long.
The same thing forever.
And like that kind of music is just like I mean this is in the best way possible, because I still love NoFX, but every NoFX song is a NoFX song, like they kind of all do almost the same thing, but it's a cool thing. Anyways, that's a whole
Yeah.
other tangent. But one of these friends, he was like, dude, we're 5 minutes away from your house at this little bar, and Good Riddance is playing here. And I was like, what the fuck is Good Riddance doing playing in Tacoma? It turns out one of the guys in the band is friends with the owner of this bar. So my wife and I go over to this show, and then it's in a room that's twice the size as my room, which is just standard bedroom size, you know? And again, you know, like you mentioned earlier, stage is this high, and it's all just people our age and older. Like the whole room became a pit. And at first my wife and I were like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. But then we just like went with the experience, and my wife even went in the mosh pit and stuff. And it was so fun. I felt like that kind of same. Well,
everyone
feeling,
there has got bad knees and a bad back, you know. So like, you know, they're being a little careful. Like, yeah, they're not quite crowd killing with the same enthusiasm. Yeah, I mean, I've you know, alongside playing music, I've done, you know, studio recording stuff and live sound for years. And I was working a show. God, I can't remember the name of the band. It was one of those like classic like New York, like pointy mohawk.
Like the Casualties, like, or something.
30. It was the Casualties. It was
it
fucking Casualties. It was the literal Casualties. And I mean, and this is, you know, in like 2016 or something. So I'm like, well, the Casualties are still alive. Like, that's
right?
Crazy.
Yeah.
and they were so bitchy. Like they were throwing a fit because they didn't have Grey Goose in the backstage, which is
my God.
I was like, this is. But then, you know, at one point they're playing this song. And the audience is like literally just like the worst behaved crowd I've ever worked with in my life. Like we did shows for, you know, like Migos and Riff Raff there, where like everybody there is like a blacked out 13-year-old, and like those shows were much better behaved than the Casualty show. But at one point they're playing the guitar players, the wireless system keeps cutting out. It's like, it was just pure clown energy.
I can't believe a band like them were using a wireless system. That blows my mind. Oh yeah.
And they were playing this song, and the chorus was "Punk Forever, Forever Punk. We're not going to change." And I'm like, do you understand like what a cell phone that is? Like at your age?
Yeah, totally. You're like, I will not grow as a person. Yeah. I never went into kind of that crust punk area, you know.
I dabbled. I dabbled in crusty. I was in some like fairly kind of crusty political hardcore bands. You know, like that was because I always liked the like. I mean, part of what really appealed to me about punk was just like the radicalism, and like I was already politically radical, so like to find that there was this subculture where it was like, you know, you listen to a Crass record, but then you like read the lyrics and you fold out the poster.
Totally.
It's just kind of like the total package. Like it was righteous and it was angry, but it was also poetic. It was beautiful. It was, you know, all these different things.
That was no effects for me. That was what kind of, you know, coming from a very, very, you know, Washington State, I think from the outside is viewed as like the emerald, you know, the green, you know, forest of liberals, but that's kind of just Seattle, and that's even like changing
the sliver of the coast, and then you go 20 miles east and you're in like hell.
Dude, yeah. So where I grew up, I was just like thinking about this the other day, and in high school, like, because I was a skater and metal, and I was in a metal band, and you know, like it's all white people at my school, maybe a couple like half Mexican kids, but like it's white as fuck. Like if I didn't allow myself to like bands that had like female vocalists or hip hop or rap. Like I had to listen to that stuff secretly, or else I'd get made fun of. And I remember having like the Wu-Tang Forever, and I know everybody's all about 36 Chambers, but Forever is my personal.
I mean, I got Forever, like I got that like the day it came out. That was a huge. I mean, it's probably not my favorite now, but like when it came out, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean,
today I could see where they could trim the fat a little bit.
Totally,
you know?
I mean the double disc nature, yeah. But there's it's like there's two songs, Reunited, and there's another one that's like 2 tracks later that I still think are like two of my favorite hip hop tracks. But yeah, it's just so weird, like why did I start this tangent? But yeah, it's just like, it's so sad. I wish I could go back in time and be like, listen, dude, like none of that shit matters. And also here's Pavement. Listen to Pavement. Don't listen to Weezer. They're just going to break your heart. Just start getting into Malkmus right now.
Yeah. He's chill. He's not going to do anything weird. Don't worry.
Right. He's not going to start making the worst fucking music. I'm sorry, anybody out there who still likes Weezer. I know it's like easy. They're an easy target, but goddamn,
they're an easy target for a reason. They suck, dude.
Oh my god, they just got. How did they get so cheesy? It's just. Yeah,
I think it's just, people want to make money. I feel like that guy is constantly just trying to figure out like what is the song I could release that would make the most money, and it doesn't really work.
Yeah. Okay. We have to move on from this. Thank you so much for giving so much of your time of this interview to just me being excited to talk about shit that people don't really come to Podular Modcast for talking about this, but there will be a handful of people out there our age that are going to be like, yeah.
So it's like that stuff shapes you, in whatever way it
absolutely
does.
Yeah, it's kind of like how your parents, like your parents are great teachers regardless, in my opinion, because they either teach you good lessons on how to be, or they just give you great examples of how you don't want to be. And usually it's a little bit of a mixture between the two. And I think that's, you could say the same for music and stuff, but
definitely.
Okay, just a fire round. I'm done sharing my stories, but I have to hear from you. 3 more bands from that era, not necessarily new metal, but bands that you think actually are still good.
I probably have to dig pretty deep into the obscure stuff because, to be honest, it's like not a lot of. I still like Rage Against the Machine.
Me too. Yeah, Evil Empire is undeniable. I love that album.
Evil Empire it just sounds great, and the playing is great, and it has not aged in the way that a lot of that stuff is aged.
Totally.
It just sounds, because it's just the sound of a band in a room. Like it, it's like if you told me like Albini engineered that, I would not be surprised, because it's like there's lots of drum bleed. It's just big, like but then there's definitely some of the like hardcore stuff that I was really into in high school, that I still really love. I love this band from Florida called Palatka. There's a great band in Connecticut called Jerome Stream that nobody cared about when they were around. They would play like 7-minute sets, and like oftentimes that would involve like a bass string breaking. So like 4 of those minutes would be like restringing the bass, and then,
holy shit.
So
that's hardcore.
So when they went on tour, everybody hated them because they would play for like 7 minutes and then stop. And they were one of the best live bands of that era. And that's like something I'll like listen to when I'm like on the exercise bike, To me, their music sounds like what the end of Akira looks like. It's just like this kind of, it's beyond hardcore. It's this like huge, massive sound. They were a 3-piece. I never understood like how they sounded like that. But the bass player is just strumming open chords, and the guitar, is so weird, and like, I don't know. Great band. They got a lot more popular after the fact with kind of, the kids of today who are obsessed with all the bands that I liked 20
that's
years ago.
Weird feeling. Yeah.
It was a thing, though. It was like, all these bands that I would go see, like Orchid and Page 99, that were just like sort of the bands that would tour around. Now these bands are, people are like, everybody hopefully lives to see the day where somebody's like, I can't believe you saw that band. And you get to be like,
right. Yeah. Well, it's funny, like you hear something like that. And like, there's like this weird thing that's just generation. It happens to everybody, but you want to be like, oh, the kids like my music. But like, yeah, I was listening to Milo Goes to College. That was released 2 years before I was born. So, I was doing the same shit,
exactly. I'm more likely to listen to the stuff I liked that was before my time. Like, I'll still listen to Black Flag. I'll listen to like Void. I love Born Against. Like, those are some of my favorite bands, and I'll just listen to that whenever, But I feel like that doesn't count because those were all bands that had been broken up by the time I was really like,
yeah. I wonder what that is. I think also because like I often joke, but I think there's some seriousness in it. It's like our formative years, like what was available to us as far as like the big rock bands and stuff. Like that's a lot of shit. Like, starting,
It was
probably,
bad.
yeah, like starting 95, they start, like Nordstrom has like the or the grunge collection, and like every band is signing any rock band that sounds somewhat like Nirvana, and yeah, and then it just kind of snowballs. But
There was a huge glut, and I mean, it's cool because some people got record deals that definitely wouldn't have. And I think looking back now from where we're at in the music industry today, it's like hard to be like that sucks because like people actually made money.
totally, yeah, yeah. I think,
But at the same time, yeah,
they were like local
I
H.
think
I
there
think
was a
local
lot.
H wasn't bad, but
Sure, I think it's just it was that the stuff that was around when I was listening to the radio, I have some affection for, but as soon as I got an inkling that there was something else, like it was kind of just like forget this because it never felt like it fit. It was just there, and again, like I was like, this is the only thing I'm hearing that feels like it's aimed towards me. And then hearing a Black Flag record, I was like, oh no, this is way more how I feel than like a Korn record.
right,
You
yeah. Fuck Korn, man, yeah. That
I mean,
fucking
if you
Life
feel
is
like a
Peachy.
Korn record, that sucks, dude. Like that's a hard life.
Totally, yeah, absolutely, no, totally, yeah, absolutely. So did you start with synths, or did you start with guitar, or what? Like, how does this go?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, I did start with synths. Uh, as I had mentioned, I wasn't really into music, and then I was sort of getting into it. I had a friend, my friend John, who I went to elementary school with, and he was making me tapes, and he had also gotten a guitar around this point, and was starting to write songs. And he, at first he didn't have an amp, so he would just put the handheld cassette recorder next to the electric guitar and like play it, or he'd play me songs over the phone. I mean, he would also play me like he'd be like, hey, I just got the CD, and he'd play it for me over the phone. It would sound insane.
Oh my god, that's so funny. That is so fun, and that's kind of adorable as well. Like,
yeah.
Let's be real.
It's just the classic. Yeah. It's just things nobody would do now because there's no reason to. But so he had a guitar. He was writing songs, and I wanted to do something. Around this time, I was starting to get into like Can and Public Image Limited and Stereolab, which was a huge band for me. And then I went and saw Stereolab, and they were touring with Sonic Youth. I got the poster right over there.
Fuck yeah, nice.
Providence, Rhode Island. I have the set list somewhere too.
Oh, cool.
But
I love, yeah, dude, I got a box with all that kind of shit too. I love it.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to hold on to that stuff. But I saw Stereolab, and they were just, they were opening for Sonic Youth. They wiped the floor with Sonic Youth.
Oh, I imagine, yeah.
It was one of the best live shows I ever saw in my life, until actually I saw them on this last tour where I think they were even better somehow, which I don't even know how that's possible. But I saw them, and they had synthesizers on stage, and I really loved their records and all the weird sounds, especially like on the kind of like switched on 1 and 2, where you get like sort of the driving rock sound, but then you have the filter sweeps and like the little like random shape LFO stuff. And I was watching them play, and I saw Moog on the stage, and I was like, okay, I guess that's what I need to get. And this is like 1998, and or 9 maybe, and somewhere around there. And so I went on eBay, and I found a Moog Rogue. It's right over there. I still have it. And it was it was like $415. I had to get my dad to like take me to the post office to like get a money order.
Oh wow, you got it, man.
It's before PayPal.
We're old. We're old.
This is early. This is the first thing I ever bought on eBay. And like and so I bought this Moog, and it came, and I could not figure out how it worked. The one I have, it has like a switch for the VCA that can be like keyed envelope or just on, where the VCA is just open all the time. And it was set to on when I opened it up. So when I turned it on, it was just meh, and I was like, I couldn't make it stop. I could hit a key and play a different note. I could change the sounds, but it just kept playing, and I turned it off. I'd be like, that's weird. I turned it back on and started doing it again. It was probably a few days before I figured out that one.
Oh boy. Yeah, and you can't just like look that shit up real quick on fucking Google, like
Yeah.
Maybe Ask
And
Jeeves,
then
maybe.
no, exactly. And I didn't, and I mean, again, I not only could I not, I mean, I probably could have looked it up, but I didn't know how to. And
Right, right, totally.
furthermore, like I didn't know anybody who owned one of these things or
Yeah.
had ever seen one, So it was just like a lot of trial and error. I had like a little practice amp and I bought like a delay pedal. And then I just kind of was like off to the races. I had never played keyboards or piano or anything like that before, so I didn't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just kind of like. And another record that was really big for me in that time was the first Joan of Arc record, which was like, I mean, it's definitely not my favorite of their albums now, but it was something so odd about this kind of like weird, sad acoustic guitar music that just would have like boing noises over it.
Yeah,
This is all like analog synths, like it was like some weird like modulation.
My version
so
of that is Granddaddy.
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely. I saw them later, yeah, and they were another band definitely in that style. Like here's a pop song, and then it's got some weird like arpeggios over it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I just like fooled around with it. My friend was writing songs. They were really basic because he was learning music. I was stubbornly learning no theory and just kind of listening and like playing by ear along with him. And then the other thing is I bought a 4-track around that time too. It was
nice.
A Tascam. It's one of the little Porta Studios. It had the strap locks on it, so you could put a guitar strap on it and like wear it.
Oh my god, that is so cool.
I wish I still had that thing.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, I think that because I was doing that in high school and we would do home recordings. My brother was taking guitar lessons at that time, so we would do recordings together too. Just kind of like weird shit. And then, I went off to college and I started playing in hardcore bands. And so I sort of like left that I was like, well, I don't need to do this anymore. Like I'm in a band. It sounds awesome. And
what were
also,
you doing? Were you playing synth?
Music.
Were you playing synth?
I was singing.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I sang in a metal band.
Hell yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was like, and that's what you did if you didn't know how to play an instrument, which that was me,
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to integrate my synth into the hardcore band at one point, and I remember our bass player was like, "No, dude, like that's no way." And I was like, "Yeah, but like check out like the Locust, check out like Cobra Kai," and I was just like, "No, dude, that's lame." So I kind of like left it alone, but then I started going back to it, and I was just making recordings alone in my basement with the synthesizer, and I like borrowed like this like Zoom multi effects pedal from a friend,
god,
and he lent me like a 7-string guitar as well.
Was it the like 505 or whatever with the 2 pedals on each side and like the red LED? Like
yes,
I had that. That was
exactly.
my first like effects pedal, and I fucking loved that thing. But it
had some like weird like arpeggiated like pitch shifted delay thing. Where
yeah.
Like, and I really liked that. So I mean, I was just basically I had no idea how to play anything, and I would just play around with sound, and I would record something off the TV, and then a friend got a loop station, and that was another big thing. So I had like my first loop station.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the multi effects pedal, and I would make like a weird loop, and I would and I was just making these tapes and not giving them to anybody,
right,
not really playing them for anybody because they were terrible, but I was into it, I dropped out of college and I hung around. I was still playing in those bands, and then I moved to LA, and around the time I moved to LA, I had like a MySpace page with some like songs I had made, and the Brian Turner, who was the station director, I still is, of WFMU, like I don't know how he found my thing, but he just messaged me and was like, "Hey, like your music is cool. You should like send something into the station." So that was why like I made my first release.
What a vote of confidence too, for somebody who's like making stuff, and like you just said, like I didn't show anybody because it was terrible, but maybe it wasn't. It just that's your so that had to have been like momentous for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean it was really cool. I mean WFMU was really big for me growing up in the Northeast. It was like a thing I listened to a lot, and yeah, and I mean, it was, and of course, I mean, here's the thing: I made a CD. I made like 20 copies with like a jewel case and like
Oh my
color
God, yeah,
photo
yeah, yeah.
inserts and everything. And like, I am 100% sure that nobody ever played that at the station, but like, it made me finish something and like put it out into the world in some
Yeah.
kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Around that time, also, right around the time I moved there, I met these guys who were running this art gallery called the Echo Curio, and they had just started it, and they were booking a lot of shows there. And so that was when I started to get into the LA underground scene, which at that point was really like Death Bomb Arc and
Yeah.
Not Fun, and then stuff around The Smell, and you know like I mean, there's so many bands, but around then sorry, go ahead.
Do you know Christopher Flieger by chance?
Christopher Flieger. That sounds really
Cooling
familiar.
Prongs is his performing name, and then he's kind of like the unofficial fourth member of Clipping. But he's released a bunch of stuff on Death Bomb Art.
That's okay. That's where I know the name from. Yeah, yeah. I've played with Clipping before, but I think it was only when it was a trio for the show.
Yeah,
But,
he doesn't. Well, he doesn't like perform with them live. I think it's like kind of like a kind of a funny thing. But they released this live album. So Christopher Flieger's like huge into field recording. Like he's like as like expert deep as you can go with this kind of stuff. So for this live album, he like put mics in like toilets in the he was putting mic under the stage, and they were like recording stuff like during the show. So it's like some of the songs you can hear it's like from a distance. It's a cool experimental.
That's really
kind
cool.
of
That's cool.
Yeah. This week's episode is brought to you as always by Patchworks Seattle. Great synth shop, and they have some exciting news. They have the new Korg ARP 2600 semi-modular synthesizer that has been modernized in the newest 2600M model with features like MIDI, a smaller form factor, and a re-engineered lush spring reverb. And it comes with a custom Rode case as well, so that's a pretty big deal, and that is available at Patchworks. And something else about Patchworks that I have utilized many times is it is a great place to bring in your vintage synthesizers and music gear on consignment, or you can do some trade for, store credit. You can shop the great selection of used gear where hidden gems and great deals can be found. I have found so much cool stuff in that used section. Patchworks is located in the heart of the Wallingford neighborhood in Seattle. You can stop by the showroom to play vintage synthesizers and shop new and used gear. It's not only the best synth shop, for Eurorack and everything else in Seattle, but it also has a ton of live events, from in-store showroom sessions with local artists to in-depth workshops and classes. You can visit the Seattle showroom to meet all these people and see, can I get into a class? When's the next event? Or you can head over to patchworks.com. That's patchwerks.com. And here's another cool piece of information. If you are shopping online at Patchworks, free shipping for orders over $75. And then one last thing, they are updating their showroom hours. So Patchworks will be now open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from noon to 7 p.m. and Sunday from noon to 6 p.m. So it will be closed Monday through Wednesday. Once again, that's patchwerks.com, patchwerks.
Oh, Clipping will come back into the story later, so that works out well.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say you were leaving off on Clipping.
Yeah, although I don't know how we got there, but
Death Bomb Arc.
Oh yeah. So yeah, exactly. So there was The Smell, Echo Curio, spot called Il Corral, Mr. T's Bowl, and there was just a ton of shows happening, and that was sort of when I started taking solo music seriously, because I'd moved there. There was all this music happening, but I couldn't really figure out how to put a band together, and it was hard as somebody who didn't really play anything at that point. And so I met this group of guys who were doing, they were 10 years older than me, so they were like in their mid-30s at that point, and they were doing improvised music as a trio. I started playing with them, and then we formed a larger ensemble, and then cross-pollination, started playing with a lot of the Not Fun bands. Rope Door and Pocahontas were two bands that I, loved and saw many times, and later ended up like talking my way into joining. And, because it was, I would see Rope Door and they were so good, and I was like, hey, this is like a sort of a thread in my life. I'd be like, hey, you guys should come over and let me record your band. I'd never recorded a band before, but I was like, I could do that.
Right, yeah. I kind of did the same thing.
While they're there, I was like...
Yeah, with Greg from Recovery Effects, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just, glommed onto him, and then luckily we became friends, and then he invited me to play guitar in his band, and yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, that's what you do. Like, if you want to... Especially as a new person, like if you want to do stuff, like show people why they should want to do stuff with you. So they would come over and record, and I would play. I'd be like, "Hey, I've got an idea for something. What if we did this?" And then I joined the band. It's like that's.
I love it. I love it.
And I found, that was around that time. All of a sudden, I went from sort of being in like one band at a time and kind of doing solo stuff to doing kind of a lot of solo stuff, and also being in like 3-4 bands at a time.
Wow. Okay. At this point, are you still using that that Moog? What was it? Did you say a Rogue?
Yeah, it was a Moog Rogue. Yeah, and I think my solo stuff, when I started out doing it, I kind of moved away from the synthesizer and was mostly playing with like guitar and other string things. These are all instruments I was not good at. I just sort of learned to kind of do something with it. And again, it was a lot of looping, a lot of effects, and like trying to find a sound. And then at a certain point, I just kind of, remember, I would use the Moog sometimes. Like I did a band with my brother called Body Dump Central, where one of us would play the drums and the Moog at the same time. The other one would play guitar.
Nice.
It was there, but I kind of wasn't like, I wasn't using it in super musical ways, I guess. And then at a certain point, I think I just, I realized I was like, I'm doing all this stuff with pedals and trying to like make these weird sounds. And then I was like, well, that's what the synthesizer is. It just like, it makes weird sounds. So I got really into sort of the nuance of the Moogs. And I think that this is something that like, starting around then in like 2006, maybe 2007, I became really tuned into sort of the architecture of like your basic like 2 oscillator Moog synthesizer. And it became for me sort of like the thing that felt like the most expressive instrument that I could play, because I just have at this point like a sort of, baked in understanding of like how everything in it affects everything else. It's not the thing where I reach for it and something happens that surprises me. It's the opposite. Right, yeah. It's like I understand it like on a very deep level. I mean, these days I mostly use the Moog Sub Fatty, which I love, and similarly, it's just a thing where like I can sit down at it with no idea and just start making music, and it just feels like a natural extension of me as a player.
Yeah, nice, nice.
So that started around that time. I started to put out music like that. I mean, I was doing, right around the time I was starting to do the Moog recordings was also when I was first starting to get into modular synthesis, which was again around like 2007.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask like, I want like the nitty gritty specifics on that. Like, did you see somebody's setup? Did somebody say, hey, you should check this out? Or did you go to a synth shop and see something? Or how did that go?
Yeah. So one of my closest friends in the world is this guy, Jeremy Kelly, who I met when I was living here in, the Hudson Valley the first time around for college. And he worked at a little record store that was like around the corner from my house. And then he lived in this apartment that was around the corner from that. And it looked over the Extra Mart. So every time I went to go get cigarettes, he would like shout out the window at me, and I'd go over to his apartment, and he would, he played guitar at that point, and we would just like listen to like Neurosis and John Fahey and Cream and like, whatever, just
you said
guitar
Cream,
music,
right?
Mostly. Yeah, Cream. Yeah, we listened to a lot of Cream.
I thought for a second you said Creed, and I was like, that's a weird one to throw with those other two. But
yeah. it was just kind of like we were just listening to, you know, King Crimson, listening to a ton of King Crimson.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
just whatever, like, he loved guitar music, and I did too. And so we just hung out. We listened to music a lot. He was a guy, we played in a couple bands together. He was an incredible guitar player. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2005, and he comes out to visit me in 2007, and he has a little Dope like A100 or whatever they're called. The little,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have it. It's somewhere over there.
Mm-hmm.
Little Dope, you know, 2-row 84 HPKs, filled with. I mean, it wasn't even filled. It was like maybe a little over 3/4 of the way filled with Dope modules. And I had been doing the Moog stuff for a while, and it was cool. And he was like, "Hey, I got this. It's really cool. Like, check it out." And I did, and I was like, "I don't understand how this thing works at all. This is a nightmare." I had also, you know, at Bard they had. I was not a music major, but they did have in the music department like a surge system, and I remember going in there once with a friend of mine and trying to get it to make a single sound and just absolutely failing. Like, I had no idea how it worked.
Yeah.
But he was explaining to me how the Dofer stuff worked, and he was showing me, he's like, you know, if you plug this oscillator into the FM oscillator, and put this oscillator, it does this. And I was like, that's fucking cool, dude. Like, I like those sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of stuck in my head. And, you know, we were super close. We would talk on the phone often, almost every day. And he, you know, he would be telling me what he was doing and like sending me, you know, emailing me like recordings he was making and stuff. And I just, you know, it seemed to me like I was like, this is what I've been looking for, because it's not about playing at all. Like with the Moog, it was mostly about sculpting the sound, but I still had to play it, you know, or at least like, you know, wedge a card under the key or something. But like with this, it was like, it's just sculpting sound. And he didn't have a sequencer. My first modular synthesizer, I didn't have a sequencer. I didn't even imagine. I was like, oh, if you have a sequencer, everything's gonna sound like Kraftwerk. Like, who wants that? You know, I mean, not that I love Kraftwerk, but like, it was just like, I was like, well, that's, you know. So
I don't have a sequencer
after
right
that.
now. That just occurred to me.
There you go.
I mean,
you know, there's.
Well, no, I have a beat step. Never mind. But
that's a sequencer.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you.
I never use it. That's why I forgot about it. It's like, oh yeah, I don't even.
So like, I mean, actually, in my case right now, I do not have a traditional sequencer. I have a brain seed. I've got a CV record, and that's it.
Okay,
you
cool.
know. But so I just got, you know, I thought this thing was so cool. He left and took it with him, and I was like, oh shit.
Oh no, yeah.
And so I started thinking about it, and you know, this is in the days before Analog Haven had opened up their second store after the first one, and you would have to like meet Sean from Analog Haven in the parking lot behind a closed Blockbuster, and he would like open up his trunk and like give you the modules you picked.
I fucking love it.
But I started before Eurorack. I started with a 5U system. It was like a, you know, synthesizers.com mostly system with a couple. I had like a Cynthia cloud generator, I think it was, or whatever the thing you could feed. You like fed a saw wave into it, and it gave you like 6 detuned saws. Killer module.
Nice.
And it was like a very simple sort of like, you know, 4 oscillator, 4 VCO, or 4 VCA, 4 envelopes, you know, like a kind of standard system. And I just, you know, and this is probably, like end of 2007, early 2008. And I didn't know anybody besides Jeremy who was doing this, and he lived in New York, except for Bill and Jonathan, both of Clipping, were both doing modular synth stuff at that point in very different contexts. I mean, Jonathan was doing like the Captain Ahab stuff, and like, and then Bill was doing this like harsh noise, you know, using modular synthesis. And David Scott Stone, of course, who is like, I think one of the real like OGs of like West Coast synthesizer scene, and he played with all these bands in the 90s, but you know, he was like played with Melvins and like played an LCD sound system.
Oh, cool.
You know. You should talk to Dave. He's a trip.
Yeah,
like,
actually, what did you say his name was? Yeah, because I definitely
David Scott Stone.
David Scott Stone.
Oh,
okay, cool.
Yes, nicest guy you'll ever meet. He remembers every person he ever meets. Full horoscope chart, and can tell you everything about. He's like, well, you know, it's your 38th birthday. So like this year is, like it's just like
really?
off the top
wow,
of his head when
great.
you like run into him. Yeah, he's a trip. Great guy. He was also doing 5U stuff.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, I mean, I was really just like learning. And I put out, a couple tapes. I put out an LP of that early system. And then I kind of like moved away from it because I sort of was like, well, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Like I could make really cool sounds and like these big drony FM, like gnarly earthquake, but then I was just like, okay, like,
yeah, right, totally, yeah.
Didn't own a MIDI controller, so like that was out. I mean, I had a MIDI module, but I didn't have a MIDI controller or sequencer. I didn't use a computer, so I was like, that was out. So it kind of just like sat there for a while. I eventually sold it, started building a Eurorack. But really in that time, that was when I really got into recording with the Moog. And I put out a bunch of tapes and of just solo Moog through, a few delay pedals and a loop pedal. And that was kind of just my thing for a few years. And it's a thing that I kind of continually come back to. I was playing shows like that 6 months ago, and it's like it's something that, to me, it's like sort of like it's kind of the default mode for how I make music. But then, as I started building the Eurorack, this is also, again, around like 2008, 9, maybe at this point. So, Make Noise is just starting out. Like a lot of these companies don't exist yet. Like if you went to the Analog Haven, products page, like it was like, 20, 25 names,
Right. Yeah.
And that was it. And so it was, but I was buying stuff. I was really into the early Make Noise stuff. I got like a Monty mix, and I got a Mass when that came out. It took me forever to figure out what to do with it, but like, I got it, and it, and yeah, I mean, it's just really, I think that the point for me where like the modular like really became my main instrument was when I got the Renee.
Okay.
And it kind of all came together. It was like I had gotten the Maths and I'd gotten the QMMG, and then I was told to get another Maths because you need 2 Maths if you have the QMMG. And I had like, I had a couple like synth tech oscillators. This is before the STO, before the DPO. Make Noise didn't have an oscillator at this point.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And but I had the Woggle Bug. I had 2 Woggle Bugs actually, and that was because I wanted to. I always, for a long time, always had 2 Woggle Bugs in the case because I wanted one fast and one slow. And the first time I met Tony Rolando, like I was playing in Asheville. I was touring. God, I don't remember who I was touring. Maybe it was with Akron Family that time. And this guy Dash, who was working for Make Noise at that time, was like a big fan of my music, and so he like talked to everybody who worked there to coming out and see the show. And Tony, went up and checked out my case afterwards, and the only thing he said was, "Wow, 2 Woggle Bugs. That's a lot of random." I was like, yeah. I was like, man, I use the living shit out of those Woggle Bugs. They're like my favorite things ever, And then that was that. Like, I think that like the next day I went out for a bunch with him, and we just like, hit it off. And
Tony's such a great guy. Yeah.
It's so sweet. Tony and Kelly both are like amazing.
I haven't like really met. I've like she's popped into the screen. Maybe I don't remember which time. Because Tony's been on 3 times now, so that's really the only time we've like talked, verbally, but we've messaged and stuff. But like when you have long form 3-hour, 3 1-hour conversations that are one-on-one, you tend to kind of So he's such a nice guy. I just met Walker in person for the first time this last.
Oh yeah, summer. Walker's great too.
Yeah, that was really cool. Walker's an awesome dude. I still haven't met Pete. Pete Spear. I think that guy's so talented. The stuff that he does with the video and stuff. But just their Instagram.
Oh no, it's so cool.
Holy shit.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. They really adapted well into that, like as a company, because I think it's hard to like know what to do with that stuff and not have it be like corny, I love that. I learn things about their modules, and when I see their posts, I want to buy their new thing that I don't have.
Totally.
Yet, A+.
And it's like, I think it's also just from my experience, because like, they're you know they're the biggest modular manufacturer, and
Really? I mean, I
I
guess that
think
makes sense, but
I
I mean,
would
you know,
think
yeah,
so. I mean, yeah, I can't think
yeah,
of like Mutable
maybe
is
Mutable
retired,
at its
yeah.
prime, right? Yeah.
Um, but
I mean,
like
their stuff is to me, it's like that's my baseline for stuff in my synth, and it's like I will never. I still have my V1 Wogglebug. I still have my V1 Renee. I sold my QMMG because I would have been dumb not to at
yeah,
those
right, yeah,
prices.
totally, yeah. Yeah, I mean the
And I
Morphogene is
sold
like,
it, and I bought 4 Optimixes and 4 STOs.
there
You
you
know, like
go.
that was
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
I don't have a Morphogene, but my Phonogene is like one of my. I've long said I would sell off everything else in my case and keep the Wogglebug, the Phonogene, and the SynthTech low pass filter. I was like,
yeah.
those 3 things to me are the best of what's out there. Like my
Yeah,
favorite stuff.
Morphogene is like, I like, if I had to, if back against the wall, I had to pick a favorite module, I think I think that's a no brainer. I love the shit out of Strega.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
playing a lot of guitar through it, and it's just
I'd love to get my hands on a Strega. I gotta do that. I didn't say in the beta test, but I got an early O Coast to like shoot some content for them,
mhm,
and that's another thing that I just use constantly. Like it's on my desk on right now because it's just such a
right,
useful box. The form factor is amazing. It's easy to travel with. The
mhm,
bass out of it is insane. Just um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no,
That's a, and I love that they made that, and like like Pittsburgh had like the microvolt at the around the same time, which is also really cool.
right.
But I'm just really glad that they stuck with that form factor, because even, yeah, I mean, it's not like it's a cheap or instrument, but like as far as the Euro world goes, like if you were just wanting to get started, like you could get a no coast, you could work a, just save money for a few months, and you could get a no coast, and then maybe a zero control or something, and start working up,
Right.
and yeah. It's,
Yeah.
and I know so many people, like, well, I don't, I actually, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I don't want to be perceived as like a kiss ass or something because they are the biggest company, but like I think they're the biggest company for a few reasons. One, they're undeniably interesting instruments and awesome sounding and everything. And two, like
100%. 100%.
they're all fucking cool. They're all really, really down to earth, really like no
Really helps.
ego. There's no, I was
Yeah.
nervous about talking with Tony, but now like like if Tony and I were to go out to lunch or something together right now, I would feel like no, I'd feel totally comfortable, and I'd be like, this is gonna be fun. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and I think in general, in music, in the arts in general, that shit goes a long way because,
mhm.
you know, hardly anybody or nobody's getting rich off this. If anybody is getting rich off this, it's not us, and like
Right.
it's, and like,
Yeah,
so ultimately, like, it's like, what do you get out of it? You get the experience of making music, which is amazing. And you get the relationships,
totally.
and I,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
me, the relationships are a huge part of that. And like, it's so cool to me that like Tony like listens to my music. Like I love
Yeah.
that.
That's
Like
awesome.
that's like that and because I would not be making the music I make without the instruments that you build.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I was an early make noise convert. My case was almost all make noise for a long time, and it's still like far and away the most modules I own by any manufacturer.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's like yeah, no, I mean they're the best, and they deserve to be the biggest. Their designs have always been incredible, and they've never stopped looking forward into something. And to
Right.
be honest, like I have mostly escaped the old gear acquisition syndrome thing, partially because I'm like a college student again, and like all my money goes to
Yeah.
being a college student and like living in a house. But it's but also I mean I think from the beginning I had the idea that like the modular system was something that I would at some point complete,
Hmm.
and that it wasn't just going to be this like open ended like muddy hole. Like
Right.
and I mean I will buy more modules. The last module I bought was well, I mean actually the last module I bought was like 2 years ago more.
Hmm.
It's also I mean it doesn't. there was a period of about 10 years where it was my main instrument for making music, my main performance thing. And I didn't play a show without it for, close to a decade. And and it's not that at this point, it's still a huge part of what I do, but I've moved away from it in some senses as like my main performance thing, partially because
what is now? Well, go ahead.
I will. So going ahead, like partially because I feel like I built the instrument to do the thing that I've been trying to make it do, and then I like figured out how to do that thing, and I did it, and now it's done. Like I could I could keep doing it, and I did. I mean, so like I made a record and it came out in like 2017 called Light Pipe. It's a double CD, and it's all built from live recordings. I'm from recordings of pieces I wrote for live performance with the modular and with the Moog as well, and some other stuff. But using the modular as like the hub of the composition, and I toured those pieces of music and played them in shows for like a year and a half, and they were really built around these two sequences I had saved on the Modcan CV recorder. So after I did the last performance of that series, which was in Spain, nice. I cleared the sequences, and then that was it. That was like I was like I can never play it again. And I don't know how well you know the CV record, but it's like it's not a sequencer. It is a CV recorder, and it's not step based. It's real time. So I had made these sequences by plugging a key step in and kind of like playing on the keyboard. And then they were something that I could never recreate. There's like ways in which the key step notes trigger weird. And then like the way it hears the notes triggers strange because I'm playing sort of like legato style, like on a keyboard, but it's a monophonic signal path. And there's just, it was gone.
Yeah,
it was gone. Right. And I think around that point is when I kind of stepped away from the modular a little bit because I was just sort of like, I did the thing I was trying to do with it. Everything else I want to do now seems like this is maybe not the right way to do it anymore. And I need to like start thinking about other things. I mean, that said, I've made, the first two House You records releases are mostly modular, but using it in, more as like a sound design element than like as like sort of the main musical piece. And with performance too, I went back to the Moogs and to other like hardware synthesizers. I think too, a thing that happens when you spend a lot of time in modular world and also like vintage synth world in general, is that you pick up something like Yamaha TG33 that's like 80s I forget what you call the name, dynamic wave synthesis or whatever it is, and you like play a chord and you're like, that's the craziest fucking sound I've ever heard in my entire life.
Did they have a rack version of that with like a green LED screen on it?
Yeah, it's not rack, it's like a desktop thing.
I think I want to say there was a rack version of that, and I think I may have used that on my first like full-length electronic album.
There might be a rack version that's like called something else, but yeah. I mean, probably it's got the joystick. It's got the vector four-way joystick where you can like mix between the waves.
Yeah,
and so I mean, it could
TG what? I want to now. I'm just curious.
TG33.
TG33. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like when you've been working in this very specific ecosystem that is so open in some ways, but also like there's just some things that a modular synthesizer is terrible for, like a polyphonic pad sound,
or making
and then you
something
have this
quickly.
digital synth. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But that was the other thing too, is that like I could make things quickly with the modular, but I was patching it the same way every time, and Also, I was getting back into the zone of starting to improvise with other people more often. And I realized that, like, for some people, this might be a great improvisational instrument. For me, it is not. It's a great for solo improvisation, but it's not great for reactive group improvisation. And just the way I play it, which is kind of like set up this whole ecosystem within the synth and kind of just like mix it from the board. And maybe like, I mean, I've done performances where I literally just turn the synthesizer on and I don't touch it again for the rest of the performance, you know,
Right.
like I just
Yeah.
let it do its thing, you know, and it's like that's, but for improv, that doesn't work so well. And so going back to things with keyboards where like I felt like I could play a little more like gesturally. Um, and then also, yeah, these like digital synths. I got the, another big part of this was like I got the Squarp Pyramid sequencer. And so all of a sudden I had this thing where I was like, I could plug in like every synth I own to this thing and play them all at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
And it's so, the interface of that thing is so easy. It's like, it's almost like the Electron stuff, but easier. And so I was just like, oh, wow, I can just make things in this totally different way. And so I got really into that.
Yeah. I think there's something about like, I love modular and I can't see myself ever like not using it in some capacity. And it is my main thing. But I've been playing guitar since I was 12, you know, and I decently know my way around a piano. Like I'm not a great like piano player or anything, but I can do it. And lately I've been playing a lot of guitar through my Eurorack. And I also got the Novation Summit because like, the reason I don't have like a proper sequencer, like I got the BeatStep Pro so I could make beats easier because I do want to make beats. But like as far as melodic sequences, like I just find that process so unenjoyable that I would if I have a melody in my head, I can just play it on this really quickly rather than sit here and do that. So I feel like, you know, I spent some time, I was, you know, baptized myself in the fire of, you know, weird swirliness. And now I'm like, okay, that's what I use this for. And I feel like I'm getting some of my best results from a modular system now with my guitar. Cause I'm like a pretty decent guitar player. So.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. No,
but I had to
think
dive in
a lot
for a
of people,
while, you know?
Yeah. A lot of people go through that process though. I think that's pretty common because it's like, most people that I know who got into modular synthesis did come from another instrument. A lot of them were guitar players, bass players, drummers, whatever, you know, and like, it's always fascinating for me to watch people like that and how they interpret. Like I saw Sam Prekop a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so did I. He was actually just in this room the other day. That was awesome.
He was. Did you see him with the duo thing?
Yeah, him and John. Yeah,
with John.
Yeah,
I would love to have seen that. And Jeremiah, I know Jeremiah.
Yeah, Jeremiah is going to be. I'm late on the episode, but after we're done here, I'm going to finish editing it. So his episode will be released later today.
Jeremiah rules. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, it was cool to see. I really wanted to see their duo thing because I had heard clips and it sounded amazing. The record is great. But watching Sam, I've loved watching him do all the modular stuff, like, you know, over the last few years because I was a big Sea and Cake fan. And I feel like he makes modular music and electronic music in the way that I would expect the guy from Sea and Cake to. And like, that's really cool. You know, there was a part in his set where he was doing this sort of like, this very like weird kind of naughty sequence. And at some point it just like occurred to me, I was like, oh, this sounds like a fingerpick guitar. Like, this is not this is not the way a sequence normally works. He's writing this sequence or he's performing it in the style of like a fingerpick guitar with that kind of patterning. And it just like, and like, I'm not going to say he did that on purpose or maybe he did, but like just sort of your proclivities as a musician. And I think that's the interesting thing about modular especially is that it's like such an open system. So it really is all about like, well, what do you want to do? And, you know, I would have a lot of people, less these days, but, you know, especially when I was putting out a lot of modular records and it was at a time when that was still kind of just starting to take off. And people would ask me like, you know, what do you put in a system? Like, what should I buy? And it's like, I can't tell you that because I don't know what you're trying to make with it. You know, like
I get people emailing me like pretty regularly, you know, with those kind of questions. And I feel bad because I feel like the answer that I want to give, and I'm sure it's similar to yours, is not that gratifying of an answer to get when you are the noob, but like that question is only like, hold on,
invest heavily in utility modules.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. But like my
need
answer,
a lot of VCAs, dog.
Right. Yeah. My answer is always like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what's the goal?
Right. Yeah.
You know? And,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, so.
Well, these days especially, because it's like there's so many different things. It's like you can build a modular as like a sample groove box, or you can
Right.
build it as an effects processor. And not only that, but there are 30 different ways to do each of those things.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
a million manufacturers making, like, I'm glad that I started when I did, because there weren't 65 VCOs to pick from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Totally.
that, in a sense, that made it a lot easier, because I was like, oh, Synthtake makes these cool VCOs, I'm gonna buy those. And then, like, and then I heard the AFG, I was like, I need to get the AFG, so I got that. And like, and then, at some point, Make Noise puts out the DPO. I'm like, well, Make Noise finally made an oscillator, I have to buy this one. It was a lot easier to just kind of like, and then
Totally.
and with Dopefer, it was like Dopefer failed in every hole before there was IntelliGel made everything. Like,
right. Totally. Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's, I mean, it's
so
funny. I think if
now.
you look at my case, what's that?
There are just so many manufacturers now. But what I do love about it is the people who get into the designing this stuff, like, I wanted to say earlier, so I think it's pertinent now, but like we were, talking about how awesome Make Noise is and how down to earth and everything. But like, that's kind of been that's been 99.9% of my experience with any company that I've like talked with on the show or met at shows or whatever. Like, it's kindred spirits and stuff. And I think this kind of format really draws in really innovative people. So yeah, there's a million brands that there's just so much actual cool shit out there. Like, most of it is unique in its own way, but you have to find like that lane of unique for you. And that's hard.
For sure. Yeah. And yes. And I think it's a lot harder now because those options are.
Yeah.
So
and it's
fast.
like, yeah. And I think the unfortunate thing, like gas is a real thing. I think there's also like, not quite, but I kind of jokingly say there's like a trading card aspect to it, like a collector's aspect to it.
100%.
But you have to, I think like a lot of this stuff, you kind of have to get your hands on it and learn whether or not it is for you or not. And that means you have to learn how to use it. And that's an expensive, trial and error process. It's good to find maybe a friend you can do trade borrows with or something. But, hearing Div Kid do one thing, right, doesn't mean I'm going to do that with that thing.
For sure. And I would say two things about that. Like, one is that's also not conducive with building a huge system quickly, because I, like most people, bought one or two modules at a time. I spent a ton of time with them, figured out everything I could do with them. And then when I finally was like, I don't know what else to do with this thing, I guess it's time to buy another module, I think that, like, ultimately, like what you're saying about, like, the way you're going to do something, like, and I think this goes back to what I was saying before, it's like, what makes any of us interesting as a musician, as an artist, is the thing that only we do. And it's like, ultimately, I can try to copy something or like do my version of something, but it's going to sound more like me than the thing I'm trying to make. Because
that's so funny you said this,
because
I've literally had this conversation this morning with Gareth and Daniel from Sunroof. Like we had this exact conversation today. I love it. That's
great. I mean, I think it's like it bears having again, because it's
absolutely.
It's like really, it's so important, because I mean, one thing is, like, when I started doing this stuff, people would ask me all the time, like, how do you do that, or how did you make this thing, or like after a show, like, what is your synthesizer doing? And I would see people be so cagey about it. And I'm like, what are you afraid of? That, like, they're going to make your music because they, like, how many people own a Stratocaster,
Right.
How many of them sound like Jimi Hendrix? Like, I mean, it's like, it's if you put so little value in the part of you that is making this stuff, like, that says a lot. I'd also say I've noticed there's an inverse relationship between the size of someone's modular system and the quality of the music they make. Oftentimes, not always, but not always. Oftentimes.
There's a trend there, yeah. And it's kind of on this topic. I was talking with Gareth and Daniel about this morning. I love my Needham Woodworks case. I absolutely love it, and I use that when it's like studio time. I want all my stuff at my disposal, especially if I'm going to like score something that I just recently shot or something like that.
Sure.
But if I'm going to try to make something that is like, I want to make just like a cool piece of music that's for myself, like the 7U Make Noise case has always been like my go-to. And I've recently just got these pods from 4MS, because
yeah.
I even wanted a little bit more manageable, because I find that my music, like I watched a set that I did in New Orleans when I was like, 2 years in maybe of playing modular, maybe less. And I was like, God damn, that's like that's actually better than some of the sets that I've done recently. And then I think about the sets that I've done recently and what made those bad? Oh, me like trying to find where something came unplugged, or, it's like, it becomes like,
right.
When the performance is managing and just keeping track of signal flow, there's a point where you get diminishing returns there,
There's a price to that complexity. And I would also say too, that like, it just further serves to kind of like remove you from the moment of the performance. If you're
absolutely
like worried.
Agree.
And this is, I think, another reason why I got away from it, because I was like, like when I would play also touring, I mean, I've toured a ton, and I've toured as a modular synthesizer artist. And that's a whole other thing. Like I've been using this Pittsburgh, like 2-row case for years now, just because I can carry it easily. And like, I have the Gorilla box that's like double the size and that technically fits like in the carry-on thing, but that thing is so fucking heavy. I got bursitis in my shoulder from carrying it around.
Holy shit. Wow. Yeah.
And it's just also like, it's like, I don't want to have a million things that can go wrong. Like there's enough stuff that can go wrong with live music. So like I always want something manageable. I take all the knobs off of like, I pull all the knobs off my STOs so that I don't like bump them and like detune them. Like it's
nice.
Like,
yeah.
My synth looks terrible because I don't care how it looks. Like
I was thinking about doing that with my Enter, because like this thing is so interactive and everything. And these, you can get these oscillators in tune nicely, but you touch those knobs and it's off, because there's a lot of range to the oscillators. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I was doing a set where I had 4 STOs that I needed to track together.
Oh, shit,
so it was like,
and it's got that big knob on it too, that big Rogan knob, which is rubber, and
plucked it right off, plucked those things right off. And and people would like scowl when they saw that, like, how dare you? And I'm like, I don't care, But if one of those 4 STOs got out of tune in that performance, I would never be able to figure out which one it was.
Totally,
and it would ruin. Maybe not for the audience, but for me, 100% would ruin the rest of the performance.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So it's like, why would I set myself up to fail?
Right? Ged, I wanted to go a little long because I've started feeling bad that I took up some of your time just talking about new metal and the audience's time. But yeah, we are closing in on this. I feel like I wanted to ask you, specific questions about some of your releases and everything. But like, sure. I think you're going to have to come back soon and do a part 2, because this was so much fun. And like I said, I feel like I want more information from you. Like I want to talk to you more about stuff. So I would like to plan on that
information.
But we have,
that sounds great.
I want to give you an opportunity. Like, is there anything you want to point people in the direction of something that you've done recently, or are you playing any show? Like, is there anything coming up, any announcements or anything?
Sure. I mean, I think it's interesting you say that, because I feel like, one of the hard things about having like, the DIY and the sort of, and especially in the Bandcamp era, is like, if somebody goes to my Bandcamp page, there's like 30 releases on there, and that's no fun, like that's like possibly a little intimidating. And, but I would say like, I mean, I think when I look back on the music I've made, always the most recent thing is always my favorite. So, my last thing on Howsu definitely Expressed I Noticed Silence, which I made almost entirely on a Electron model samples, which is like like $250 plastic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's cool. Sample. Yeah, that's like
my first sampler. Awesome. It's my first ever sampler. So that
I almost bought that.
I made a couple of records with that. Oh, I love it. It's so much fun. It really, I mean, talk about like limiting choices forcing you into stuff. Like I made a bunch of samples with it, and then I don't think about the sounds. I'm just like, how do I make this into music? You know?
Right.
And I would
Yeah.
just finish tracks.
That's what I do with the
So
STS.
that one,
That's like, yeah.
sure, yeah. And then I'd say I did a CD on Room 40 like 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago at this point, called Light Pipe. That to me is like that's like kind of my big modular synthesizer statement. I don't know if I'll ever make a record again that is kind of that devoted to that vibe, but it's a 2.5 hour long ambient record.
Whoa,
so
I'm looking for it right now. Is it on your is it on your Bandcamp page?
It's not on my Bandcamp. It's on the
okay.
Room 40 Bandcamp.
Room 40. Okay, yeah, because I want to check that out.
You can stream it.
I'll put links
it's a thing.
in the
I think
show
a lot of people
too.
Oh yeah, cool. A lot of people didn't hear it because it only came out on CD because it's 2.5 hours long. And I was like, I'm not trying to, we're not doing that.
Right.
But to me, I think it's my friend Miles once said it was his favorite thing to listen to on flights. But I think it's
nice.
It's really good for any kind of like creative work, reading. It
Mm-hmm.
moves extremely slowly, but it's like a river. It's moving slowly, but it's always moving. It's always changing, and
nice.
it's a very special piece of music to me.
Okay.
And came out of all these things I was doing live, and great memories of shows. Playing with Survive, playing with Ohm.
Oh,
and,
cool!
all these
yeah,
bands that I love.
Yeah, I've had Kyle and God, now I feel bad. I'm blanking on his name, but
Michael.
I know it's Michael. Yeah, I've had those awesome dudes.
Known those dudes forever. And it was so cool to see them do what they did and just like blow up like that. Because I don't know two guys who worked harder at that stuff.
Yeah, and what a world we like. That's like, God, I'm old, but that's like one of those scenarios where you just got to step back and be like, what a crazy world that is. Like the way that all happened and kind of helped, like really, like Eurorack and synthesizer music is definitely like, on the rise, I think. And I feel like, Survive is a huge part of that with Stranger Things and everything. That's so cool.
And they were, what I love about them too is they were doing that exact same shit for years before that show. Yeah. Like I would see them play and it was like, like 80 BPM, like, and it was, they didn't change. They've been doing that forever. They do it better than anybody else does that now, so respect where it's due, and also just great guys. But yeah, I mean, again, it's about the relationships. I loved playing with those guys. There was once upon a time they asked if they could open for me on a tour, which is
that's fucking rad, dude. That's rad.
But that says a lot about where my life has gone and where their lives have gone. Because then I was, this would have been like art galleries, and then like a year later, I'm opening for them at the El Rey in front of like 1,000 people, and I was like, whoa.
Wow.
I mean, look. Did they deserve to be there? Did I deserve to be where I was? Yes and yes. Like,
right, absolutely.
I mean, everything was right where it should be that night,
Yeah.
But it's just, you love to see people you like succeed.
Totally. I agree.
Hopefully.
I do. There's just one release that caught my eye. I saw the Magic Seals of the Seven Angels. I just wanted to kind of like devotional movements for synthesizers. Like, can you just tell me about that? Like, I don't like
that one was. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, this is going to be. I'm going to put on my nerd hat, but like I'm a huge Neon Genesis Evangelion fan, and so when I saw that, it kind of like reminded this the same symbology and language and stuff, and I was wondering if that was connected. It's in the stew. Okay, cool.
It's in the stew, yeah. I mean, I think that one was actually, it was originally supposed to be for Leaving Records. And thank God, I kept sending them things and they kept taking too long to put them out. And I'd be like, well, I'm sick of this thing. I'm going to do something else. And I did that a few times and ended up with, the record I put out with them, Ishi, which is like probably one of my more popular releases. And a lot of that stuff too is early experiments with digital synthesis, because I had just gotten MS-2000.
Oh, cool.
I saw Jeff Witcher, who was at that point performing as Renee Hell, was doing absolutely just like bonkers kind of experimental synthwave stuff with the MS-2000. So I went and got one and realized I could not do what he was doing.
I've
there's a lot of that
those.
on that one, and like, yeah. Those
Played
are fun.
one.
Those
Yeah,
are fun.
we used one in my pop punk band back in the day.
Oh,
but,
hell yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, my friend Seth has mine still. It's sort of like perma-loaned. And I'm sure I have something of his too. So, it all works out in the end.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
so you made this album on that?
Coming up. I use that a lot. I think there's early modular stuff, some Moog stuff. It's a real like grab bag because I feel like that was sort of when I was like in that kind of transitional period and figuring out what I was doing with synthesizers before I had really kind of like nailed down the kind of, for lack of a better word, like ambient thing that has sort of become more my trademark over the years.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's stuff coming up. There's nothing I can really talk about now, but I'm working on some cool, exciting projects. There's going to be a record at some point by the trio with me and Greg Fox and Graham McMurray.
Maybe you guys could come on when that gets closer to release, and we could all have a roundtable.
And I think we'll do that with Hausu almost certainly. And then. I'm working on some collab stuff right now with John Elliott. I'm really excited about that because he's one of my favorite, just one of my favorites for a long time. And I mean, I love Emeralds, but especially like the Imaginary Softwoods catalog is, I think, like, nobody is doing it better than John, in that specific vibe. He just has the sound I want so dialed in. So it's fun to work on stuff with him. And some cool stuff at the end of the year that, maybe when I come back, I'll be able to talk about that then.
All right. Well, now we have it firmly like stamped into our intention, on our dream board. Well, Ged, thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.
Tim, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love doing these shows. I love meeting new people, and it's always like there's just an extra zing on it when we're close to the same age and have kind of close to the, some similar stuff. So from the childhood.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. So thanks for letting me take up some of your time here today on that stuff.
Oh, I mean, my pleasure. It's fun to get to talk about this stuff because, my wife gets sick. No,
that's why I started this show.
I'm not going to make my wife joke, but it's no. I mean, like really, like I feel like a jerk, but I do want to talk about it. But unless somebody asks me, I'm like, well, I'm not going to talk about that.
I'm the same way. Yeah, totally.
But give me an excuse, and I will just go on and
right,
on.
Right,
like,
yeah. Cool. Well, actually,
I think it's cool because it's just yeah. Sorry.
I know. I was just gonna say I got to ask though. One final question: is there anything you want to shout from the modular mountaintops?
Anything I want to shout from the modular mountaintops? Yeah, gear doesn't matter. That's it. Gear doesn't matter. Musicians make music, and they will make it with whatever they have in front of them. And if you find yourself waiting to do something because you don't have something, it's the worst reason in the world to not do something.
I agree.
And in fact, many of the best things I have ever done have been because I wanted to do something with a piece of gear I didn't have. And so I figured out how to do it incorrectly with a piece of gear I did have.
Yeah, right. Yep. I've done the same thing. Yep. Just lean into the limitations.
Tools are great, and having great tools is great. And I would never tell anybody that that's wrong. But I think that, especially with synthesizers, there's a fetishistic quality and like you said, the serial syndrome, collector syndrome, whatever. I just think, whatever. Look, if it keeps all these companies making this stuff because they can afford to keep making it, right, yeah, then God bless, go do your thing. But I think, people, I'm speaking mostly to people who not somebody who already has all this stuff, but if somebody who's thinking about getting into it, it's just make music and get stuff when you can and just finish things is the other thing. Just finish things. Put them out into the world. It hurts
Find a way
less
to impose
every time.
a deadline. If you need a deadline, that's fine. I never played live electronic shows. because I was, I'll book a show when I have a set, and I never built a set. So I just eventually was like, I need to book a show because I'm never going to build a set. So I booked a show before I had a set, and then that's what I just kept doing.
100%.
Yeah.
I will go weeks, sometimes months without making music, and then I'll get booked for a show, and I'm like, oh shit.
Right? Know? Yeah.
and then I'll make a record because I was so excited about getting ready for the show.
Totally. So yes.
That's
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's So yeah, give yourself the compassion to like finish things and put them out into the world, and just do the thing you want to do. There's literally nothing else to do but the thing you want to do. So
totally agree. It. Well, thank you so much.
Shouting that from the mountaintops. Yeah, thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
All right, that's our show. Thank you so much to Ged for coming on the show. Thank you for coming back, or welcome if it's your first time. Thank you to all the sponsors: Afterlater Audio, Patchworks, Novation, Flight of Harmony. Go get on that Kickstarter. Don't forget about the Discord. Send me your music. I want to hear it. What else? I think this week's secret word is going to be dinner triangle. Is that a thing? I know there's dinner bells. Anyways, yeah, I appreciate you. Until next week.